When I was growing up in Michigan, I remember I used to tell people all the time that I was from Syria, and nobody knew where that was, or even like what it was. But unfortunately, everyone knows about Syria now, and they only know about it because of the war. I wish the Middle East and North African region wasn't always associated with war and violence, but that seems like the only way people seem to recognize it. My name is Leanda Han, and you're listening to MENA Mentality. The MENA region has gone through its fair share of struggles, and sadly, it continues to do so. Between the war in Syria, Yemen's food crisis, the occupation of Palestine, and the recent explosion in Lebanon's capital city, there's a lot happening. And unfortunately, all of this trauma is how people know about the region, because that's what most journalists cover. My friend Kaan Akkaya agrees.
Whenever I told people I was from Turkey, they would say, "Oh, is it safe there? Like, can you like travel there on holidays?" I was like, "What?" And so I think sort of journalists and sort of news reporters have a lot of influence on sort of how people interpret different countries.
There is a tweet I saw the other day about traveling while Muslim, asking people if they change how they dress or how they behave at airports, and the responses were things like, don't speak Arabic at the airport, tie your scarf differently or wear a hat instead. And then, of course, there was the act overly nice thing, which I find extremely relatable. According to the Pew Research Center, about a quarter of Muslims feel singled out by airport security.
Unfortunately, the negative things you realize when you grow up, when like your parents sort of shield you from, there's differential treatment based on your passport. And you first feel it when you go through passport control and when you go through security at the airport. This is your first experience. I was treated differently when I had a beard on and when I shaved my beard, which is, it's sad, but it's the reality. And you do feel that there's this sort of othering.
And it is the reality. According to a Gallup poll taken before 9/11, only 1/5 of Americans supported racial profiling. In 2010, a CBS News poll found that number jumped to over 1/3. We have to fix the narrative, which is something I discussed with Jessica Winegar, a professor at Northwestern University who does research on the Middle East. Obviously the media has a big role in how Americans perceive Arabs and Muslims and everything like that. So do you think there's a way to fix that narrative over time, or do you think it's something that's going to stick for a while?
I think in the past 10 years, the so-called liberal progressive media has been better than it used to be in terms of not reproducing those kinds of stereotypes. However, the conservative media is still obviously trafficking in them. And the tone of the presidential, what the administration of the president does shape that. So during the Obama years, I think that given that his father was Muslim and he lived in a Muslim country, I think that the media kind of started to see things more complexly. But now, unfortunately, with the Trump administration, it's back to much more stereotyping.
And the stereotyping makes it feel so unsafe sometimes. Like when I was living in Florida in 2016, after Trump was elected, I remember my parents asked me to wear a hat instead of a scarf for a few days because they were afraid I would be targeted. And, they had good reason to be afraid. According to an FBI hate crime analysis that was conducted by the Washington Post, there were more reported hate crimes on November 9th than any other day in 2016. The hate crimes almost tripled the day after the election.
It is really interesting, though, when you look historically, how the United States, the U.S. public, through its media, produces an enemy. So, the enemy until 1989 really was the Soviet Union. And so the stereotypes and negative imagery around the Soviet Union, I think, were much more intense and widely circulated. But then after 1989, it gradually becomes Arabs and Middle Easterners. The stereotyping started before that, but they become positioned as the main enemy.
According to the Pew Research Center, over 80% of adults believe Muslims face discrimination in America. And to a lot of people, Muslim and Arab seem to be synonymous.
Now I'm actually wondering if we might see a shift because of coronavirus and the sort of heightening of the xenophobic rhetoric against the Chinese, for not just coronavirus, but for trade issues, et cetera. I mean, definitely anti-East Asian violence has been increasing in the United States and Canada, and I'm wondering if we're entering a new era where that might become the new enemy of the US.
I would hope not, because feeling like the enemy is not great. Anti East Asian violence has not only become a thing in the US, but has been widespread because of COVID 19. In the UK, Asians have been punched in the face and accused of being infected. In Brazil, the media have reported harassment and shunning. Even in Spain, 2 men beat a Chinese American man so badly he was in a coma for 2 days. So, how do these globally connected issues relate to what's going on in the MENA region?
It's really, really important at this moment to link struggles internationally and within the United States, for example. So to understand that the ongoing protests in the region are linked to what is going on in the United States. And the best example of that at the moment, the most robust example is the connection between the Black Lives Matter movement and the Palestinian freedom movement. And people seeing that this struggle against, apartheid actions, against police violence, against the police and military industrial complex, against incarceration, that these are linked. What's really great about your topic right now is it brings this conversation forward at a moment where I think people are just now starting to recognize that we are all connected in these struggles.
The Palestinian Israeli conflict is one that has been ongoing for several decades. Despite what people might hear or believe, it's not a matter of religion. It's a conflict about settler colonialism, which is about replacement of the Palestinian people. Hanan Awad, a Palestinian American, helped me understand a bit more about how this all started.
During the British Mandate in Palestine, the British promised the Palestinians self-rule and independence. The promise was that the Mandate rule will end and Palestine will be free. But the British already signed a declaration called the Balfour Declaration in 1917, promising the European Jews a home within Palestine. Meanwhile, Palestinians lived in Palestine for centuries.
So what happened? Well, the Palestinians wanted their own self-rule after the British Mandate, but so did the Zionist settlers. This led to the Partition Resolution, which was created by the United Nations to divide the land between both parties.
Palestinians were 2/3 of the population, yet were offered just 43% of their own land. The partition plan was never implemented. However, right after, in 1948, war broke out. In this war, the Zionists aimed to ethnic cleanse Palestinians from historical Palestine.
This became known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, which led to the destruction of over 400 villages and the displacement of thousands of Palestinians.
Well, when it comes to Palestine, I feel we need to raise awareness, and through social media today is the best way to talk about what's taken place there. We could write letters to the government. We could write our opinion in local newspapers around us, whether we live in the United States, whether we live in Europe or in any other Arab country. Also, I feel like we need to bring the voice of the Palestinians, to give them a chance to talk about their story, because always it's like a third party explaining who they are.
So, as someone with Palestinian roots, what are some kinds of things that you might do to help preserve your culture?
So I have to say that it's very necessary to practice and keep our rich Palestinian heritage going. And I do visit Palestine every year. I took my children there. I showed them the village that I grew up in. I showed them the importance of the olive tree in our backyard in Palestine. I got married in New Jersey, but my wedding was such a Palestinian wedding. I made sure to wear a thobe, part of the wedding. A thobe is an embroidered, colorful dress. It's a Palestinian tradition.
Palestinians are known for their beautiful cross-stitch embroidery, or as they call it, tatriz. The tradition has almost exclusively been done by women and has been passed down over generations.
So through this colorful embroidery that we grew up seeing in our household, or seeing our grandparents, grandmother wearing that thobe or the dress, seeing my mom wearing it in special occasions, whether it's a thobe or whether it's like a piece of art on the wall, or whether it's embroidered on a cushion on my couch. I see it as a Palestinian culture, as a Palestinian identity. It gave me, in a way, a bridge to connect with my Palestine, even if I'm not living in Palestine.
The MENA region has such an incredible mix of different cultures, traditions, languages, landscapes, everything. There's so much beauty and history there. Take Lebanon, for example, which is home to my friend Mathew Aboujaoude.
I mean, when people think of Lebanon, or when I tell them it's in the Middle East, because sometimes they actually don't even know where that is, they automatically assume sand and desert and camels, and, they think it's, a country that is close to the Gulf, but it's actually, the complete opposite, and we're on the Mediterranean, and, there's mountains and nature, and it's a beautiful country that's just, closer to Europe. And it's always fun correcting them, because their reaction when they learn this new piece of information is priceless. And I'm like, yes, that's Lebanon.
Although I love teaching people about where I come from, it kind of would be nice if I didn't have to. It's a little tiring sometimes, especially when you have to explain it to people who might have some animosity towards the MENA region. It's like you kind of have to walk on eggshells to make sure they won't react badly.
They have this sort of internalized racism that they're not even fully aware of. And my dad's always told me that when I was a kid, because he went to high school and college here. And he's told me about some of the stuff that had been said to him, or even my aunt, after 9/11. Like, they have a Lebanese bakery here, and, people came and threw rocks and just tried to trash the place. And we're Lebanese. Like, what does that even have to do with 9/11?
Sometimes it's mind-boggling to find out how little some people know about the MENA region. And it's really sad when you think about how many people wish us harm. The violence that some of them would like to cause the region is ironic, because they themselves think the Middle East is super dangerous. Fighting fire with fire, I guess? My friend Alkamil says these negative views just hurt everyone.
We're not instinctively violent. We don't want to fight. We don't want wars. We don't want to kill. Because why would we fight each other when we're both from the land Jesus walked on? It's not about religion, it was political. And the reason it was political was, and always has been, no offense to them, but Western colonialism. That's why we're always fighting each other. Let's say like an infiltration that led all of the conflicts, most of them at least, to be where they are now.
While I don't understand why any group of people would want to fight one another, I do understand that there are flaws in every society. Adam was telling me how important it is to practice what we preach. Just because Arabs are known to be hospitable people, it doesn't always mean we are. Sometimes we're hypocrites, but aren't we all?
The whole time I'm saying Arabs family-oriented, very friendly, very kind. But at the same time, we're all pointing fingers at each other. A Lebanese will point at a Syrian in Lebanon and say he should go back home, or a Palestinian and say he should go back home, or a local pointing at an Indian or Pakistani saying he should go back. And this is something that baffles me. Why aren't we together? I mean, it would be such a strong, I wouldn't say nation, but a strong entity in and of itself. We have Shahamat al-Arab, or Karamat al-Arab, the honor of an Arab. as we say, or the chivalry of an Arab. We're chivalrous people, we're honorable people, respectable people. We should show that more often, especially with our own kind.
I think what we really need is unity. And I really hope we get that someday. My name is Leanda Han, and this was MENA Mentality. Special thanks to everyone who contributed and to all of you guys for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes.